Welcome again, everyone, to this first virtual press briefing of the European Medicines Agency. My name is Marie-Agnes Heine. I'm the head of the communication department, and I'm very delighted to have with me Noël Batillon, who is EMA's Deputy Executive Director. He will give an overview of the areas in which EMA is involved in the fight against COVID-19. And I'm also happy to have with me here Marco Cavalieri, who is EMA's head of biological health threats and vaccine strategies. And he will explain how EMA is supporting the development and approval of medicines and vaccines against COVID-19. So please note that your microphones are disabled for the duration of these two presentations. But when we start the Q&A session, we are going to open the microphones again. And you can adjust the sound by clicking on the small arrow close to the loudspeaker icon on the menu bar. Please have a look. And then please note also that today's briefing is going to be recorded. And after the session, we are going to place it on our website. So we have just 45 minutes today, and therefore, I'm going to get started. So I am handing over now to Noël Batillon. Noël, please.
Thank you. So good morning, everyone. I'm going to give you an overview how the European Medicines Agency is responding to this COVID-19 pandemic crisis. First of all, we have to emphasize that this is a top priority for the agency. As of the start, we have put in place the necessary procedures, mechanisms in order to make sure that we can adequately support our response to the COVID-19 pandemic. We have done that in collaboration with our network, meaning the national competent authorities of the member states and the European Commission. And our focus has been on three different aspects. First of all, supporting the development and the authorization of safe and effective medicines and vaccines. This will be further elaborated upon by my colleague Marco Cavalieri, but the authorization, the surveillance, the monitoring of medicines is of course the core issue within the agency's mission. We have to emphasize that we are only at the start of this journey, that this work will have to continue over months to come as more vaccines and treatments will come to the agency in terms of rapid scientific advice, rolling reviews, etc. We are closely working with regulators in the network of the EU, but also with other regulators at international level in order to harmonize requirements, in order to align approaches and ways to expedite medicine development at a global level. The second aspect relates to availability of medicines and how to ensure that in the best possible way. Now, it's very crucial that COVID-19 patients have access to the necessary treatments in the context of COVID-19. And of course, there have been issues in the past with supply of medicines, and certainly that is an aspect that has become referred to is the availability of medicines used in the intensive care units, where we saw problems in relation to anesthetics, antibiotics, muscle relaxants, as well as medicines used off-label for COVID-19. While the situation has now improved in the meantime, we also have to make sure that we are prepared for a second, a third wave of the pandemic and for any future pandemics that we still may encounter. There are three areas where we have taken actions. First of all, we have built on something which already existed pre-COVID-19 pandemic, which was a rapid exchange network with the member states, the so-called SPOC system, single point of contact system, with the member states where they inform us about any current or anticipated shortages of critical medicines, critical in the terms of where the authorities are of the view that there are no alternative treatments in their territory. Secondly, we have launched recently a similar system, but now with pharmaceutical industry, and primarily those pharmaceutical companies who are involved in for the treatment of COVID-19 patients. This amounts to some 450 marketing authorization holders who now are starting to report current or anticipated shortages directly to the agency for primarily medicines which are used in intensive care units. Thirdly, we have established a dedicated governance structure at the EU Executive Steering Group on Shortages of Medicines Caused by Major Events. It's composed of the European Commission, EMA, and the member states. It will review the shortages that are being reported in order to see what kind of remedial action can be taken. One of the actions that has been taken, for instance, is to introduce regulatory flexibility in order to provide prevent as much as possible shortages of medicines. The third pillar is giving advice to patients and healthcare professionals. It is very important that patients and healthcare professionals have up-to-date information on the use of medicines, medicines that are being used in the context of the COVID-19, which is based on robust scientific data. That advice is being elaborated together with our scientific committees, and it is there in order to make sure that the public is fully aware of the latest information, once again on the basis of robust scientific data, as there may be quite a lot of fake news circulating. We have, for instance, issued recommendations in relation to hydroxychloroquine, chloroquine, also ibuprofen, ACE inhibitors, etc. Now I'm going to give the floor to Marco Cavalieri in order to further elaborate on the activities that are being taken in relation to the area of treatment. Thank you.
Thanks, Noel. And Marco, now it's up to you. Please get started. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Noel and Maria-Agnès, and good morning to all of you. Indeed, the EMA, since the inception of this crisis, so even before it was declared a pandemic, trigger our health threat plan, which entails the setup of an EMA task force. And this task force proactively started contacting developers of medicines and vaccines, potentially for COVID-19, in order to start as soon as possible a dialogue that could speed up the development of such medicinal products. Now, we have already been in touch with approximately 115 developers of therapeutics for COVID-19 and approximately 35 developers of vaccines for COVID-19. We are exploring options to speed up the development of such medicinal products, and we have different tools, among which I would outline the possibility of going for a rapid scientific advice that could be done also in a matter of days, depending on the actual need. We also have the option of going into a rolling review for the promising products so that data are assessed as they become available, and this would allow that the committees of the EMA could come up with a rapid decision-making process in terms of authorizing vaccines or therapeutics. These are just examples of the many approaches and tools that we have been considering. The bottom line is that we would like this development to come up as rapidly as possible. We know that on average, as an example, for a vaccine, it might take 10 or 15 years from bench to market. Now here, the ambition is to try to have such vaccines available in a year from now. This might be possible, at least for the front runners, but of course, it's very important there is continuous dialogue with regulators in order to make sure that all the testing are conducted in an appropriate way and that we have a good overview on what is the safety and efficacy of these medicinal products and vaccines. So it's extremely important that there is a continuous collaboration among all the various stakeholders to make sure that we can move ahead as rapidly as possible, but making sure that we are protecting those that participate into clinical trials and those that will receive this medicine once they get approved. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Marco. Probably you need to clarify that we had contacts with developers of around 115 therapeutics and 33 vaccines. So only to make that very clear. And now I give the floor again to Noel. He wanted to complement and also summarize what has been said so far. Noel, please.
Thank you, Marie-Agnès. So in short, yes, this is a top priority for the agency. We are focusing on 3 areas, which is in relation to the therapeutic response that we are providing, which is in relation to the supply chain, and thirdly, advice to patients and healthcare professionals. It has meant that the system as a whole, so not only the EMA, but also the network, has to provide the necessary resources in order to make sure, as also Marco was referring to, that everything can be progressed as quickly as possible on the basis of robust scientific data, and we can come to a speedy process and speedy outcome in terms of the opinion making at the level of our committees. Therefore, we had to ensure that the resources were there. We have done prioritization of activities. We have done resource allocation. We have done a business continuity plan together with the network that we will publish shortly so that you can see what the effects will be in terms of the other regulatory activities. Thank you.
So now we are going to the questions. As I said, your microphones are enabled, and the first question comes from Thomas Milgarina from the Swiss Broadcasting Corporation. Thomas, please go ahead.
Good morning, and first of all, thank you for organizing this. I hope you are hearing me. You have seen probably the polemics that was created by Sanofi CEO that at one point was saying maybe we will distribute the vaccine first in the US, then in Europe, because the US is engaging more. Then he corrected his declarations. I don't know if you want to enter specific on this issue, but perhaps you have things to clarify in terms of speed of engagement and comparisons with other countries. Also, I have not understood clearly, is the result of this work that you're doing on shortages of medicines is going to be what? Is going to be some kind of a comprehensive report that you will submit to the European Commission on what kind of medicaments are in short supply in the EU? I don't know if it's that simple. And I apologize if this is a silly question, but as you understand, I'm not an expert of the sector. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Thomas. Perhaps Noel can start in responding to the question on shortages, and then Marco can complement also probably on the international collaboration.
Yes, thank you very much for that question. In fact, you have to look at each shortage, what is behind it, what is the root cause for it, and what can you do about it. So I'm going to give one example. For instance, sometime a few weeks ago, there was an export ban which was issued by the Indian government in relation to 14 active pharmaceutical ingredients. And we had to see what was the impact on the EU in terms of that particular export ban. So what the agency has been undertaking at that moment in time is that we reached out to each of the member states concerned. We asked the member states, what does that mean in terms of your demands, in terms of the availability of stocks at your level? That information was collected. That information was passed on to the health commissioner, Stella Kyriakides, who then in turn went to the Indian government and made clear that these were the consequences for the EU, and as a result of that, the export ban was lifted for these active pharmaceutical ingredients. So this is one example of how we are trying to deal with a particular issue. Another one is that when you see that, for instance, in the manufacturing process, it could be useful in order to change a solvent or to the sourcing material, what kind of regulatory flexibility can be introduced in a speedy way, but it normally would take quite a lot of time in order to approve, and then that is being undertaken. It is very much appreciated by the pharmaceutical companies who see here ways in order to prevent shortages happening and providing, of course, necessary supplies to the citizens.
Thank you very much, Noel. And Marco, can you perhaps continue and respond to the second part of the question?
Yes, so there is intense
Over to
international
you, Marianne.
collaboration, and the EMA is really engaging with a number of the players here, starting from the ICMRA, which is International Coalition of Medicine Regulatory Authorities, but also with the WHO, and also we have a very strong connection and dialogue with the United States Food and Drug Administration. So this is very important because we all recognize the importance of being aligned in the requirements and what we can do in order to speed up the development of vaccines and therapeutic in the context of COVID-19. And we are really looking forward talking to all developers and, of course, making sure that at the end of the day, when we approve vaccines or more than one vaccine, hopefully for Europe, these vaccines will be made available for European citizens.
Thank you very much, Marco. The next question is from Ludwig Berger from Reuters. He is asking a question in writing. Good morning. Is there now a trade-off between safety and efficacy versus speed of review and approval? Or is the speedier review only achieved via reprioritizing or more efficient procedures? So perhaps, Marco, you can respond to that question. Please, Marco.
Essentially, what we are doing here is to make the process more efficient and really geared towards giving a rapid feedback to developers on what they're planning to do and the data as they emerge. But clearly, I have to point out that we as regulator, we are going to be very careful in having a good assessment of the safety and efficacy of these vaccines, and therefore we will not be cutting corners here. We stand ready to look into what is the minimal evidence that could lead us to give a positive opinion and an authorization for these products, but not necessarily with an amount of evidence that is considered insufficient.
Thank you very much, Marco. Now we have Jillian Deutsch from Politico. Jillian, can you please ask your question?
Working as it is. I can always write it out too.
Fine, please ask.
Okay, sorry. My question is about this balance between safety and speed here in developing a vaccine. So I have two questions about how to do that. The first thing is that some people are saying we should skip phase 3 clinical trials of a vaccine. I'm curious if that's something that the EMA would support. I'm also curious because there's been growing support for vaccine challenge trials, and I'm curious if the EMA's perspective is on those.
Marco, did you understand the question? I think it was one for you.
No, unfortunately, I could not follow.
Audio difficulties, I have to admit.
Yes.
So, Jillian, perhaps you can write your question and then we are going to respond to it. So we continue now first with Thomas Meek from APM. Thomas, please. No, you are inviting. Sorry, I'm going to repeat your question because it's written here. Several industry figures have commented on the benefits of BARDA in the US and the lack of an equivalent in the EU. What is the panel's view on this and whether there could be an EU BARDA? Marco, I think that's also for you.
Indeed, in the context of this pandemic and in the aftermath, it will be very important to reflect on whether we should build something in Europe that is similar to what has been done in the United States with an agency like BARDA, as clearly this is turning out to be an important actor in terms of making sure that developers are moving out rapidly and they have sufficient finances for conducting the research that could lead to therapeutics and vaccines for emerging infectious diseases.
Thank you very much, Marco. And now I'm calling on Michael Peel. I think you have raised your hand, so if you want, you can ask your question yourself. Otherwise, as you have put your question in here also in writing, I'm going to repeat it. So how much has the UK been engaging with the EMA and in what ways? Perhaps, Noel, can you probably respond to that question?
Thank you. So the UK is engaging with the EMA primarily through the International Coalition for Medicines Regulatory Authorities and also as part of the whole international environment. There are day-to-day contacts with the UK in this particular respect.
Okay, many thanks. The next question is from Ian Schofield from Pink Sheet. He asked, when do you expect to receive the first marketing authorization for a vaccine or treatment? And which products are most advanced in development? Marco, that's clearly a question for you.
Yeah, of course, some of the therapeutics are more advanced and they already been tested or are undergoing clinical trials as we speak. So clearly, we might expect that some of these therapeutics, if clinical trials will be successful, could be the first one they might be approved for use in COVID-19 patients. For vaccine, as said, since the development has to start from scratch, it will take a bit longer. But we might look from an optimistic side that, as said, in a year from now, so beginning 2021, some of the vaccines that are already advanced in terms of development and has already started clinical trials may be able to have a package that could lead to the potential approval of these vaccines.
Thank you very much, Marco. And I have to apologize to Danny Kemp from AFP because the screen was scrolling so quickly. So you also have a question and wrote it here. So your question is, you said the ambition is to have a vaccine in a year and it might be possible for the front runners. But how likely is this? Also, the WHO has just said that the virus might never go away. Is that something you fear based on your knowledge about current progress with vaccines? Marco, please.
Of course, these are, just forecasts based on what we are seeing and what we expect might happen. But again, I have to stress that this is a best case scenario. So we know that not all vaccines that enter into development will make it till the end and will come to authorization. So many may disappear on the way towards that goal. And we also know that delays are always happening. So, of course, we have to be prepared. They might be taking longer than that. At the same time, based on what we're seeing and the plans that are being proposed, we can see the possibility, if everything goes as planned, that some of the vaccines could be ready for approval in a year from now.
Thank you, Marco. So now Jillian, she now has put her question in writing as well. It's also one on safety and efficacy. She writes, I was wondering about balancing the safety and speed of developing vaccines. I was wondering what the EMA's perspective is on skipping phase 3 clinical trials for vaccines, as some people have suggested doing. There's also been growing support for vaccine challenge trials, and I was wondering what the EMA's perspective is on these trials. Again, Marco, please.
Thank you for these questions. Indeed, this gives me the opportunity to stress that in principle, we would like to see efficacy data from these vaccines. So our current thinking is that all the vaccines under development should undergo large phase 3 trial in order to try to establish what is the level of protection in the field and also give us a broad safety database. This is our current thinking. Things may evolve as the pandemic will evolve, and we will see if we need to do something else. But for the time being, we are strongly convinced that this is the way to go, and that's what we expect that developers will put effort into. With respect to the human challenge studies, these are very interesting type of studies that have been used also with other pathogens. And we know that these studies can be extremely informative. And of course, if these studies are considered ethical, then we would be ready to discuss with developers what can be done with these studies and what kind of impact they could have on the development plans.
Thank you, Marco. So we have another question from Ian Schofield from Pink Sheet. Given the fast-track mechanism you have put in place, such as rolling review and rapid scientific advice, how quickly could you realistically complete the evaluation of any therapeutics or vaccines that are submitted to the EMA? And is there provision for a faster process for the European Commission to issue a marketing authorization following any CHMP positive opinion on a vaccine treatment? Marco, please.
Of course, it's very difficult to provide precise timeframes in this respect, but here the idea is really that we can make things happen much faster than normally is the case. And of course, this will depend on a case-by-case basis, based on what has been submitted, what could be the issues, what would be maybe the need for additional data before an opinion can be reached. But really, the rolling review would allow really a compression of the time frame so that a company can submit data as they become available. And this, of course, means that they don't have to wait until they have the entire file ready for submission before we can even start looking at the data. This is, of course, will really reduce the time frame significantly.
Okay, many thanks. And we have another question from Michael Peel. I think it's Financial Times. Is that correct? I don't see it. What do you think of statement from Sanofi CEO that the US would get first access to any vaccine Sanofi develops? How worried are you about the lack of rules on vaccine access? Perhaps I give this question to Noel first, and perhaps then Marco can complement. Noel, please.
As already was said by Marco, I think we have to make sure that all patients not only in the EU but worldwide, because it is a worldwide problem, can have as quickly as possible access to whatever treatment and whatever vaccine is being approved. Now, in terms of a lack of rules on vaccine access, I think this is something which is currently still being debated. So first of all, you have, of course, the licensing process, because you cannot start about giving the vaccine without being sure that it is safe and efficacious, as Marco has already said. So in the meantime, we are working at the European level, seeing what can be done in terms of providing as quickly as possible access, and those discussions are currently ongoing.
Thank you, Noel. Marco, do you want to complement, or is that okay?
I think Noel said it very clearly. Of course, we are collaborating with European institutions and with the member states in order to be sure that at the end of the day, these vaccines will be available for European citizens.
Thank you very much. So Gillian Deutsch from Politico has another question for Marco. You say it could take a year to approve a vaccine in the best case scenario. So what do you think of some vaccine developers predicting they'll get a vaccine by September, like a prominent team from the University of Oxford has suggested? Marco, please.
Well, we would be happy to be proven wrong, and if somebody comes up earlier, we can just be happy with that. But of course, we are basing our prediction on our experience in assessing vaccines and seeing how long it takes in order to submit a file that is comprehensive in all the minimal requirement around the vaccines before approval. Therefore, we are a bit skeptical that September is realistic, but again, time will tell.
Okay, many thanks. There's another question, I think, from Thomas Migliarina from Swiss Broadcasting. Thomas, do you want to ask a question?
In fact, and actually it was a clarification, because I didn't get completely, because of an audio problem, the answer on the therapeutics. You said some of the therapeutics are more advanced, undergoing trial. We might expect, if trial is successful, that they may be approved, but I didn't hear when. For the therapeutics, not the vaccine. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
So Marco, please.
Yeah, so the therapeutics are more advanced, and some, as you know, already provided some top-line results from large clinical trials. Therefore, it might be possible that before the summer, some of these therapeutics could be approved. It's a bit early to say, but I cannot exclude at this point in time.
Thank you very much, Marco. So, Gillian again, so how will the EMA ensure trust in the vaccine if it's super fast-tracked? Marco.
That's, of course, a tension that we have to work with. And I think here, again, we have to be sure that this trade-off is not compromising the certainty that we need to have around the safety of these vaccines and making sure that they will be sufficiently protective. So that's why we need to work together with the developers in order to understand what kind of evidence can be provided in the shortest time possible, but that at the same time will give us sufficient reassurance that these vaccines are safe and effective.
Many thanks, Marco. So Danny Kemp, who can only put his questions in writing, he would like to know. No, Noel, you wanted to say something as well. No, sorry.
Yes, thank you. I would like to complement what Marco is saying. It's, of course, a very crucial question that is being put. And I think what also is going to be needed in terms of of making sure that we have assurance being given is we have to be transparent. We have to even be more transparent at the end of the day than what you're currently doing in terms of what has been reviewed, what kind of data, what is the decision that has been taken by our committees, and that has to be very clearly elaborated so that this will certainly be undertaken in the context of this particular exercise.
Thank you, Noel. Okay, I'm reading out Danny Kemp's question because he says he can only write it. So could I ask you to specifically address those WHO comments about the virus never going away? Based on what you've seen, is there a possibility we'll never have a vaccine? Marco, please.
I think it's a bit early to say, but we have good reason to be sufficiently optimistic that at the end of the day, some vaccines will make it. There are several technologies that have been approached here and are under investigation. And therefore, I would be surprised if at the end of the day, we'll not have any vaccines available for COVID-19. Now, how long will it take and what could be the issues around these vaccines is too early to say, and we will have to learn as we progress.
Thank you very much. Ian Schofield has another question. Ian, do you want to ask your question yourself, please? Okay, it seems a little bit difficult, so I'm going to read it out. Can you give an indication of how much interest drug and vaccine manufacturers have expressed in using the fast-track mechanism? That again would be a question for Marco.
We received a huge interest. Indeed, most of the companies found that this approach for rapid scientific advice and the possibility for rolling review really as a good way of moving faster in terms of regulatory discussion, and at the end of the day, designing the trials appropriately, going on appropriately with the development of the drug and vaccines, and at the end of the day, get a rapid approval.
Okay, many thanks. And another question from Julian Deutsch from Politico. Thanks so much for taking so many questions. A question from a colleague. Would the EMA consider a recognition model? For example, if the FDA approved the drug or vaccine first, whether they'd rely on the FDA's work to fast track? Marco, please.
Well, what I can say is that we are working very closely with the FDA, and in the past, particularly in the area of vaccines, like for the Ebola vaccines, we are really been working hand in hand and conducted assessment in parallel and sharing views continuously. I think this has proved to be really a good way forward, and I do believe we should build on this kind of experience also for COVID-19, and we are indeed having regular contact with them, so to make sure that we are aligned as much as possible and that every aspect that is important is not left behind and considered in an appropriate way and in a coordinated way.
Thank you very much, Marco. I don't see any more questions. Noel, did you want to add anything before we close?
Oh, thank you. I think it was a very useful exercise, and we hope that we have provided you with the necessary replies, but I see that somebody else is still putting a question, two persons, so perhaps I give the floor back to you, Marianne. Yes.
Well, I don't see it yet. I think it's mainly thank you. So many thanks for your interest. We are now closing this press briefing. If you have any additional questions, please go back to the press office. Also, if you have encountered any technical difficulties, please let us know, because we may have additional press briefings in the future. So many thanks to all of you and have a good day.